If you're watching this, it's probably because I recently asked you to geo-model a building in downtown Fargo. And that is what I've got open here. A lot of you did okay. A couple did really well. A couple, maybe not so much. But what I'd like to do is show you the correct answer, so to speak. So I'm going to go ahead and close those up and start a new file. So this is a review of my last video. I need to open up my Google. And we're going to move into advanced photo texturing. So this method really uses nothing but SketchUp. We're finding our location, and we're finding a building footprint, and we're using Street View imagery. Now, a lot of you probably found out that it's convenient, but it can be a little limiting in terms of the quality of the photo and some other information. Now, this building was fairly convenient in that we could access all the sides. In a practical, real-world exercise, you're going to find out that that might not be quite always that convenient. But let me go ahead and grab this. I want to show a few really common mistakes. A lot of you got this far, but the first step a lot of people missed, and that is aligning your axes. So let me review. When you set up the axes, don't forget about this inference locking. And if I infer that side, I'm holding down Shift. I can hover to this edge here and click, and if I click once more, that is all squared off. Let me get rid of that. I've mentioned this before, but if you do a search for rotated rectangle, there's a plugin, and it functions like this. It's really easy to install, not entirely necessary, but pretty helpful. And you can do just that, draw rotated rectangles. This is the next step. You need to orient your axes. Now, I recommended right-clicking and select Align Axes. That only works if this bottom left-hand corner is 90 degrees. So if for whatever reason it was not, you either need to redraw that shape, or you could do a little bit more careful placement using this tool here. Now, if you grab that and follow the instructions in the lower left-hand corner, you'll see what to do. So the point of our axes is here, then the red direction is here, and then the green direction is here. But watch this, before I click, look how that axis is kind of flipping around. It's a little tricky, and it's pretty easy to get it to point somewhere you don't want. If you ever want to return this axis to its default location, you just need to right-click on it, preferably out here in white space, and select Reset. So that's actually a very subtle but very powerful tool, because you could have shapes, for example, like this. Maybe there's some reason you want to align your axes to this shape. Well, let's see what happens. Right click, align axes. Now anything I draw is just that. It is aligned to that axis, which is obviously a different orientation than my base plan. Let me hit undo and go back to this step. Right click, align axes. Alright. Then we will give this some height, and I'll apply a texture. Another common mistake. A lot of you applied all 4 textures and then went back to try to correct the height. And as you found out, it's a little bit of extra work. It's not totally the wrong way to do it, but it will make more work than what you'd probably be willing to do. Alright, so I'm going to start with just this side. Select region. Now I really have to kind of guess where that corner is, but I can get pretty close. And hit grab. Oops, and I forgot to select a face. Easy problem to fix. I will select that face without the push-pull tool. Hit select region, and it should still be set up where I just dragged those push pins. There we go. Let's close this. So next step is to assign a height or derive a height. And if you read the reading assignment, there's all kinds of links to help you do that. This is one of my favorite. Just take a known height, a door, for example. fairly safe to assume that is probably a 7-foot door. I actually carry around a laser measurer because I get really picky about these things, and I'll go out and measure a building if I'm going to geo model it. Find a height of either some overhanging element or basically anything. You could even have a friend stand up against the building when you take the photo. Regardless, once you've got an area of known height selected, you need to scale it to that height. So here's what I like to do. I'll use the tape measure tool. I'll create a line that is 7 feet tall. That is still selected, and then I will grab the scale tool. Now, some of you noticed when you did this, you couldn't get it to work. It was very difficult to grab. That was exactly because of the alignment of your axes. And let me back up here just to illustrate why that's a problem. If I just arbitrarily put my axes here, my scale is relative. My scale action is relative to that axis. So if I hit scale, look what happens. It's actually putting my door in a little box because it sees that geometry as an angled vertical surface, not as something that aligns conveniently along the axis. So, good stuff to know. I promise it will help you in the future if you understand this. So even though I'm repeating a lot of the stuff I already went over, it's really good to know. Let's go back to this. Scale, 7 feet. Scale that texture, sample it. And you're probably noticing I'm doing a lot less explaining of the actual tools, and I might even be using a lot of shortcuts without really thinking about it. If it's moving too quick for you, I recommend you go back and watch the bootcamp videos that I created that go at a much slower pace. But once this is set, all we need to do is change the geometries to match our building. And if I were to measure this, about 35 feet, which is correct. Now, some of you I docked points for not having really clean models, and it usually had something to do with extra geometries like this, or helper geometries like this that needed to be cleaned up. So a clean model is always a good habit to have. All right, once that height is accurate, I should be able to right-click, add photo texture, and just go around the building this way. Now, for the sake of time, I will probably only do 2 of these. So here's a situation where I can't quite get the whole building. I can either find a view where I can get the whole building, or another option, I'm going to come in here and divide up that surface. Well, how do we do that? You know what? There's no specific order that you need to do this. I'm going to sample that surface, apply it to the top. Well, right here I can see that clear division between the buildings. Now I can grab my pencil tool, separate those geometries, and I've got 2 faces to work with. All right, let's go back here. So it's just another way to really optimize and get the most bang for your buck out of these images. Sometimes you can resize this. So close. Let's try 1 step over. Yeah, I'll do this one instead. Another tip that's not entirely required but still helpful is you don't always need to worry about the little details like this, because let me show you why. Once your building texture is fairly squared off and you hit grab and we move this out of the way, you can still push pull and otherwise affect these geometries, and notice that that detail in the image is still there. So I'm going to hit escape, and I'll come back to that in a moment because I would like to fix that window or that door or wall. and so on and so forth. Now you may have noticed that this is not actually the same height as this portion of the building. Well, that's okay. I could undo that and reapply it, or I can select that and either push-pull it down like that, and notice that I'm trying to match the height. And this is a situation where estimating is fine, but take a look right at that intersection, or that juxtaposition of these two facades. Well, that's fairly easy to estimate. Now, because of the nature of this facade, I can kind of do that, but I'm really push-pulling that texture, and I still have a stretched, distorted texture. This is the correct way to do that. You would want to grab that surface, grab your scale tool, and move it down. Or in this situation, you would group it first, because notice we are running into a situation called sticky geometries. So make group, then edit that group, scale, move it down. And notice the rest of the geometries do not change. And then I could push-pull this down. So there's a lot of ways to get to the correct, reasonably estimated height. A lot of people misjudge the actual door. Keep in mind that overheads are very rarely exactly 7 feet, because that would make the door very small. So this one, you know, if you really looked at it and studied it, you could maybe figure out what the door was. This side would have been a better option. Now I won't go around and do the back side, but I do want to address 2 points. One is editing the texture. I'm not sure why some of you had problems with this, but let me go ahead and open up Photoshop by hovering over texture, edit texture image, and it's now open in Photoshop. So you can edit this and save it. I'm going to close that because I forgot one step that I highly recommend. That is to create a unique texture first. Right click, add photo texture. Whoops, right click, edit photo texture is what I meant to say. And we've got this. So a few of you during the in-class exercise were telling me that it wasn't saving, but then when I came by and showed it to you, it did work. So not exactly sure what the problem was, but let me really quickly go in here and I'll Photoshop out this pole here. Now if you were really ambitious, you maybe found a way to get rid of the van. I'll give it a quick go here. Oops, I messed that one up. Should be easy to fix. So I think I'm redesigning the windows on this building. But you get the idea. All you need to do is close this, and when prompted, hit save. Now, that will update it. You have to jump past this one as well. Watch the van. Poof, there it goes. Let me do that once more. Some of you might have inadvertently added another layer which changes the format of this image. So let's give that a shot. I'm going to do a little freestyle testing here. That's very large. So if I save this without flattening it, let's see what happens. It is effectively saving it as a new separate file that is disconnected from the original one we edited. So notice it did not show up. That might be why, I don't know. Without seeing in a specific example in more detail, I can't really tell. Now, the roof, let's take a look at that. To make a really quick and somewhat realistic roof, I recommend just giving it a little bit of an edge, and there's always a little bit of depth. You know, unless it's a really technical, this is just a visual presentation of this, so it just needs to be believable. It doesn't need to be accurate. Roofs on flat topped buildings like this usually don't look a whole lot different than this. There's usually a slight slope and there's usually a couple of drainage portals. Some of you did stuff like this, where the building was abnormally deep and the parapet wall was abnormally tall. Just be very conscious of scale and proportion. Like, that is not an accurate proportion, at least for any buildings in downtown Fargo. Let's hit undo. But there are small things of detail that are worthwhile to be paying attention to, and things like, I'm going to draw a couple extra geometries here, get the right one. This little bump out here. So an appropriate level of detail to add and increase the effectiveness of this model. Now this item back here, well, there's two ways you could figure out what that was. Judging by the shadow, you really want to train yourself to be watching for things like that. You should be able to see that that is in fact another small room. You know, it's not a small thing, it's probably about, you know, that big. And if you were to add this back facade, that would reinforce that. So without going into more detail, because hopefully you know all of this, I'm going to jump ahead to a complete, very simple Photoshop or photo textured building, continuing with this method. At the end of this process, you should have yourself a fairly convincing, in terms of proportion and rough color, a fairly convincing geo model. Now I want to show a couple other little useful tips with this. One is to change your face style. Now, if you've played around with these, the first one is a toggle. That's actually independent of the rest. That activates X-ray mode, which allows you to see through it. Good for identifying extra geometries, such as this thing on the back that I forgot to erase. So let me grab that. Just generally a useful modeling tool as you're navigating around your 3D SketchUp space. So let's turn that one off. The next one is a hidden edge. So it's kind of like X-ray. It allows you to see through your model and see back edges. Now, I believe it also lets you snap to those back edges, does it? Yeah, it does. Notice I can snap right through this building, or infer in this situation, to that back edge. Useful button right there. Next one is wireframe. It takes away all of your geometries and effectively just shows you the wires that your model is composed of. Next one, hidden line. It hides the lines that you obviously can't see through, but it just makes everything white. The next one's kind of interesting. It's a shaded mode, and it estimates the color based off of the texture on any given face. So notice how some of these faces are obviously different colors, and what SketchUp is doing is it's taking all of the pixel information and just averaging out the color. But it's a fairly useful little trick, especially if you're searching for more of a schematic look and less of a photo textured look, which of course is this button. And the next one, Monochrome. What this one is really good for is it sets the colors of your SketchUp model to be basically positive and negative. If it's a front face, it's whatever color your front color is set to. If it's a back face, it's a blue color. Those are the defaults. There are a lot of reasons why it's good to know that. My general advice is to always make sure any exterior or outside texture is the positive or the default whitish brown here. And I see a couple more details I can clean up. But the exercise we will move into next is a more detailed photo texture model. How do you do that? Short answer is you need to take your own photographs, and I just happen to have a handful of them here. Now, there's a link on the Google Help section. I don't have it handy. It was in the assigned reading, but it gave you some tips. In a nutshell, the more photos you take, the better. And this building is fairly easy to get around. So you can see I've taken probably 10 or 11, and I've tried to get all of the edges. Now, the more times you do this, the easier it gets, and you learn little tricks on how to maximize the textures. For example, this one, I could make a fairly convincing repeating texture, or I could stitch it together with these other ones to make a complete facade. But let me get out of here, and I'll quickly go through a couple of ways we've already talked about. One is applying the texture and stretching it directly in directly in SketchUp. So this is independent of Photoshop, just SketchUp. And I'm going to go ahead and import one of those textures. So let's see here. I think I want that one. Yeah, that'll work. Now, notice as I import this, I did that absolutely wrong because I meant to do a texture. So import as a texture and just put it on a surface. Now, if we invoke this image edit operation, we can drag this image and stretch this image out. So right click, texture, and position. Now I've talked about the colored push pins. I've generally said I don't like them. Let me very quickly explain what they do just in case you're curious. Red one moves your image if you click and drag. Green one scales and rotates. Yellow skews just that corner. Blue shears so you can make your parallelogram. Let me get out of that. Unless you are really comfortable, uncheck fixed pins and set it to this. And then it's as simple as repositioning these and then dragging them. Now, I think I've got the wrong image. I actually want to do this one over here, or the wrong facade rather. Now, I recommend that you do this exact exercise, and as you zoom in, you'll notice you've got much better detail to work with. You can really zoom in close and get these precise. One more. Let's get that out of the way. So with those pins set by clicking and releasing, the next step will be to click and drag. Now this whole process will involve you to come back and make minor edits as necessary. So you might find out that your proportions are a little bit off, your height is a little bit off, the details are a little bit off. That's fine. I'm going to hit enter to register that. And right away I can see that this top bump out could be a little bit better. And already a lot better. Okay, here's a very useful trick. You don't need to do it to this other or adjacent facades, because imagine that this texture is extending. Even though we've only applied it to this face, it actually extends beyond that face. And if you go back to your position mode, you can see that it actually extends out and beyond from what you actually see. Let me hit escape. Okay, with that knowledge, you can sample this, and if I apply it over here, it just applies the extension of that image. And additionally, I can even erase geometries like that. I don't need it anymore because that is just an extension of that texture there. So we could do that all the way around, but let me show you a second way, and then I'll just briefly talk about a third way, but I won't go into great detail. The other way involves Photoshop. So with Photoshop, you would edit all of your images first. So we do all of the scaling ahead of time. And I'm going to go ahead and open this one. And look at this. So this whole back area doesn't even exist on my model. So maybe that was not the best one. Let's try another one. All right, this works out pretty well. Notice this facade, much, much, much nicer than whatever got kind of slapped up over here. And the geometries exist enough to kind of know where to connect the pieces. You can see that this area here is most likely represented by that. So to help me draw this, or help me align this, I'm going to first create some geometries in SketchUp. So I'll make a vertical line here because I only want to work with this face. And I know that that face is going to be applied to this one. All right, this is the prep in Photoshop first method. Grab the crop tool, start a crop by just dragging a crop area, and make sure, very important, that your perspective option is selected. So what I'll do is, it's kind of like doing this in SketchUp when we are repositioning those little push handles. Now, some of you had questions on heights of buildings, how to know the exact height. Well, here's yet another way. If you know the height of a course of brick, you can come in here in the details enough that you can actually count the brick, the rows of brick. I've done that before. All right. That looks a little weird. I wonder why that is angled. Well, probably because it does that. All right, so once that is set, you can hit enter to register that crop, and it creates your shape. So now it's just a matter of saving these. What would that be? The back southwest facade. And back here, I can either edit that and replace it, but I'm going to go ahead and place it instead. Back facade, import, click. I'll snap to this top height. Now, do I trust more this image or the proportions of my building? In this situation, I would go off of the proportions of the building, because the crop tool, sometimes you end up with some not quite accurate in terms of height and width, but you get a squared off image, which is helpful. So in this situation, I would right click, edit that texture, and drag these push pins over until they snap. So this is nice because you can actually see how much nicer quality you can get using this method. So what's the third option I was talking about? Well, you could actually reconstruct your entire building in Photoshop. And this is actually a very common way that this is professionally done. It seems like a lot of work early on, but in terms of a larger workflow, it will actually save you time. Now, I wonder if I've got... I don't believe I have. I have a really good example file. I will have to save it for another time. But here's what you do. You essentially reconstruct your image in layers. So wherever there is a texture that you would eventually apply in your SketchUp document, you would create a separate layer over here. So I'll make a new layer, and I'm going to call this one West Facade. And then I would go ahead and navigate to that building. I need larger, and there we go. And I would use my perspective crop tool to crop that off. Now I'm aware that that image does not continue beyond that. But that is okay for the next thing I'd like to show you. Hit enter, copy that, come back here, paste it, and do a Command T or a Control T and align it to your model. And you could think of this as really an unfolded model. You would do this for every wall, and when you come back, there's a few ways you can do that. You can use this as one large texture that's in your SketchUp model, or you could come back here and selectively copy and paste and export these different layers. But I'll show you more examples in more detail of this method. More important that you are just aware of it. One last thing. It's worth showing you the, where's it at? Automate and Photomerge. Okay, it's off your screen, so you can't see this. But if you go to Automate, you will not see all of this geographic imager stuff. That's custom plugins. At the bottom of this list, you should see Photomerge. Now that is really slick because you can select multiple files. Notice on that side, I only had half of that facade, so I'm intentionally going to grab a couple that I hope are the same side, and I'm going to select auto for my layout and blend images together. So watch what happens when you hit OK. It thinks for a while, takes those images, thinks some more, have a sip of coffee. Cross your fingers. Scratch your head, wonder why it's taking longer than normal. And hopefully you will see an automatic photo merge where it stitches together your different images to give you one fairly convincing solid image. So now I could come in here, crop this. Ooh, look at that. Apply that in Photoshop, and now we are in business. This, of course, it provides a couple dilemmas. One, it's obviously much nicer, but it also means it's going to be a little bit trickier to clean up because you can't quite fudge it as much. Well, here's an example of hopefully how easy that is. Let's increase the size of that. Sample an area. And I might be in the wrong, oops, I'm in the wrong layer, that's why. So I'm going to go ahead and flatten these. Same trick. There we go. This is kind of a fun exercise too, so you'll get a chance to do a little bit more surgical cleaning up of your model in the next assignment. With that, I will end and give these walkthroughs a go.